I'm going to start with something near and dear to my heart. My beloved alma mater, St. Augustine High School. I'm a proud graduate of the greatest graduating class in Yellow Jacket history, the class of 1999. This episode is going to be devoted to my 2015 interview with Coach Joey Wiles, former Yellow Jacket head coach, celebrating the 10th anniversary of the 2005 SAHS state championship team. To set up the interview, let's talk a little bit about my Wednesday night show. It was enjoyed by countless listeners, and by countless I mean there were no listeners to speak of or count. But I decided that with the 10th anniversary of the St. Augustine High School and Nice Championships, that I would do a 1-hour show devoted to those two teams. When I had the radio show, it was on WSOS, which was a music station. As part of our agreement, I would play songs throughout, and then there would be some commercial breaks in as well. So I had very limited time and only had time for one guest each. I decided that my St. Augustine High School guest would be Quinterrence Cooper, the quarterback from the 2005 squad, and then the Nice guest would be the late, great Craig Howard, who was the coach of Nice in 2005, and happened to be in Daytona Beach for the NAIA National Championship. So after the Quinterrence Cooper interview, I was getting ready to put the track on with the Craig Howard interview I had recorded earlier in the day when my producer, Kathy Sherwood, picks up the phone. Again, fledgling radio show, so not many callers. In fact, I don't know that I had maybe 1 or 2 callers ever the entire time I was on the air. But she picked up the phone, and she says, "It's Coach Wiles on the phone. Do you want to put him on?" So, of course, there was no question. I scrapped that entire segment and aired it the following week and said, sure. So what follows is an interview that I was extremely nervous for, extremely unprepared for, and just in shock the entire time that I was actually getting to talk to Coach Joey Wiles. So I hope you enjoy it. My apologies to Brian Rizzi. I did call him Byron in the interview. Again, nerves. But this is my interview with Joey Wiles from 2015. Listen and enjoy.
What a lot of people don't realize is that first year, we ended up going 8-3, but we had a signature win. I want to say in week 4, Mainland came rolling into town, and they were, I think they were a 6A school, ranked number 4 in the state, and we beat them at our place, and that was almost like one of those wins that kind of got the place excited, and then kind of from then on, the kids kept working, and we had tremendous staff that we had put together, and and it's 20 years later, we're blessed to still be winning.
Now, you made your first playoff appearance, I believe, in 1999 with the Yellow Jackets, and then just 2 years after that, you have the team with Willie Cooper at quarterback, and we just heard from Quinterrence Cooper, but you had Willie Cooper at quarterback, who was, like his brother, a complete ball player, and you had so many other guys on that team as well, and you get to the state championship, and it doesn't quite go the way you would have liked it to go. What did you take from that experience that helped you down the road?
Well, I would probably put a lot of that on myself because, I know when I first came, Jim McCool from Palatka said, listen, St. Aug's a place that you can probably win more than you lose. And I thought, well, that's pretty good as a high school coach. You'll be able to stay a few years. And so when we finally got to the point, where, hey, we're going to Doak Campbell Stadium to play at Florida State for a state championship, we were more in awe of being there. And the next time around in 2005, that was not the attitude. The attitude was we were gonna prepare, as best we could, and we were gonna go down there without, with the thought of there's no way we're not coming back and bringing a championship to our city. So, I think we went in that first year, just kind of happy to be there.
Now, in the 2005 season, you have what, arguably to that point, was certainly the best team you had. You had so many players on offense and defense, Robert and Quentin Hancock, Jacques Rickerson, Byron Rizzi on the defense, Nathaniel Wellner. You had so many guys on the defensive side of the ball, and you had some of the greatest playmakers St. Augustine's ever had on the other side with Quinterrence Cooper, Rayshawn Wilson, Brandon James. Did you know going in that 2005 could be the year?
Well, I know this. We thought we could definitely make a run at it because the year before playing bowls, and really, what a lot of people realize, we were very, very close to really winning 4 state championships. The one before 05, our 04 year, bowls petitioned to come up one classification because there were the small schools in the Panhandle that had threatened the FHSAA of getting out of the FHSAA. So they allowed bowls to play up. And, after the game, after bowls had played in the state championship, I had called Corky and said, hey, I want to congratulate you. And he told me, he said, Coach, we played the state championship the week before when, we played you guys. So we very well could have won that one. But I remember Brian Rizzi going into my wife's room that next Monday after the game. And he told her, she taught math there, he told her, we will never feel like that again. And they didn't. I mean, and you talk about great leadership, Quinn Terrence, a quarterback, and Brian Rizzi, and of course Brandon James and Jaquez. I mean, we had great leadership, and they were kids. The great thing is we didn't have to police our football team. They took care of it. So it was no question, a special group.
That was probably one of the best bowls teams ever. Later in the 2005 season, you go against what was probably the best Nice team ever, and Tim Tebow. What was it like? I mean, we saw how when he got to Florida, it still wasn't easy. What was it like to have to come up with a game plan to have to stop Tim Tebow?
Well, one thing we did, and I tell everybody, Tim Tebow made me a better coach because I saw him as a freshman and then went and watched him play in the spring game at Nice. And after that game, I saw all the things they were doing. They were 5 wides and 4x1 and motioning and 3x2 and motioning. And I've got a close relationship to Bob Stoops. And after that game, I called him. I said, Coach, we're going to face this kid and all this stuff. Is there anything you could help me with? And he said, go ahead and come on out. So I flew out there and spent about 3 days with him and Bo Pelini, and talked a lot of coverage stuff that we used, and we actually still use a lot of it that people at the time weren't using, and that really helped us. But you sure better have the players, and we had them.
I talked to Coach Howard actually earlier today, and that was one of the things I asked him about. Is at the time, now everybody runs the spread offense pretty much at every level. But at the time,
Sure.
At least in Northeast Florida, it was still a relatively new thing. And he had all these great athletes, and they were running things that a lot of teams had never seen before and putting up 40 and 50 and 60 and 70 points a game. And you guys seem to, holding Nice to 35 points at that point was a big deal.
Yeah. And because he, because they were doing so many things that a lot of people weren't doing, you didn't see it week in, week out. I knew at that time we better get some answers by the time the summer rolls around, so we can start getting ready, for the fall and to defend that stuff. Now, everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people are in the spread offense, and people see it every day. So that was kind of the early, the early years of the spread, and they were really good at it.
Going into Miami, you guys had just played a tough game against a very, very good North Marion team where it was really on all those leaders you talked about earlier to make the plays that won the game for you. What was the preparation like preparing for Booker after coming off of, it means every game's a big game in the playoffs, but coming off of really what was probably your toughest game of the season?
Right. Well, I will tell you, and I'm sure, if you talk to Quinn Terrence for any length of time, he will tell you, our preparation never changes, just because we always want the kids to. I think if kids see that you change something, change up how you're doing something, that they might sense that there might be some concern. So we pretty much practice, pretty much the same way. And the one thing we did now what we did a little bit different than our other playoff years. I worked Penn State's camp for over 20 years and became pretty close with Coach Paterno and the staff up there. And one thing he told me, he said, make sure your teams are always well rested. And before I did this, I called up there and I said, what do you guys think about, us not going full pads at all into the playoffs, just going shells or helmets? And he said, hey, you know what, if they'll hit, you'll get their legs under them. And I remember, I would ask when Terrence and Brandon, Nathaniel Warner, Matt Garris were, some of our leaders on defense, and Brian Rizzi, we've talked, and I'd ask them, I said, hey, how do you guys feel? And they said, Coach, we feel great. We feel rested. So for 5 straight weeks, we never went full pads, which is very, very rare today. Most coaches say you're crazy, but our kids, I don't feel were ever tired during that 5-week period.
Now, I think in that game, your staff did an incredible job. The team was ready. The players made the plays, of course, but I felt like Jim Sauls and yourself put the players in position to make those plays. But one of the biggest plays, and I was talking to Quintero, and he said he never thought of it this way, but I thought the turning point in that game really was Jacquez Rickerson's pass interference on Sam Shields.
Yeah, that was huge, because I want to say a play or two later, I want to say Nathaniel,
it was the next play, I think.
Nathaniel, and I don't remember who hit the running back, but Nathaniel recovered the fumble, and then, and I think a drive later we go down and Caleb kicks a field goal, and we go into halftime 17-0, and there's no question that was a turning point in that game.
Now, from your standpoint as a coach, what kind of? It's a 14. There's a difference between a 14-7 game and a 17-0 game, no matter which side of it you're on. But from your standpoint as a coach, how satisfying was it to know that even though it was a penalty, it was the smart play and the right thing to do, that Jacquez had the presence of mind to make that play?
Well, I'm going to tell you this now. My wife had Jock in class, and she teaches or was teaching at that time a high-level math class. Jock is a smart kid, and I know, he was smart enough to know to go ahead and make the play. And we always tell him, listen, if you're beat, you go ahead. If you got to, you tackle the kid. We'll go ahead and make them snap it again, but don't give them the cheap one. And he did that. And again, that's a playmaker making plays. It was the same way with Rayshawn and Quint and Quint Hancock and Brandon, and those were playmakers making plays, and that's what they did.
It certainly probably made your job a little easier as a coach to have that kind of talent around you, but you were able to shut down a very good Booker team. When the game was over, what's going through your mind? It's been 10 years. You built this team almost from the ground up. They were 2-8 the year before you got here. And now 10 years later, you've got a program in place. You've got your coaches, your staff. Everybody's on the same page. Everybody's working together. And to see that culminate with a state championship, what was that like for you at that moment?
Well, it was an incredibly emotional time, just because I felt like God had put so many wonderful people in my life, my family, and the great coaches that we had then and still have, and just wonderful kids. Kids when we first got there in '96 that we're going through 3-a-days, and we were getting up at 5 in the morning. They were sleeping at the school, and we were putting them through so much. But we just felt like if we could build mental and physical toughness in them, we would develop a program we'd be proud of. And so it was an emotional time, when it happened, and even to this day, you kind of it kind of makes you a little bit emotional to think about everybody that was involved in that.
To me, your biggest legacy isn't so much the wins, and there have been a lot of them, and there's been a lot of great accomplishments, but the kids that come out of your program and they go out and they contribute to the community, they're good people in society. A lot of those kids come back to you as coaches and assistant coaches, are now working their way up through the ranks. Talk about that a little bit, about so many kids that have come back to you. And, guys like Nathaniel Wellner, who's on your staff now, guys like Brian Braddock, who had an incredible year at Mandarin, and so many other kids that have come back to you. What is that like to have those kids who've been there before, who know what's expected of them, know what the players should be expecting? What's that like?
Well, I can tell you, with that state, the state championship is an incredible thing. But the thing that, when I lay down, at night and go to sleep, and I think back over the course of 20 years, the thing that makes me, the either the most happy or most proud, whatever it could be, are those guys. To see a Brian Braddock that's been a product that played here and, coached with us, and now he's out, he's going to have the premier program in North Florida. I mean, he's way on his way to be in the top program in Duval and in 8A. And then, Nathaniel, who's, ready to be a defensive coordinator here, to follow in the footsteps, maybe, a little bit of Brian and, Quinterrence Cooper, that I've had, this year, an opportunity to see him grow as a person and a coach, and, to watch him. The thing I'm so proud of is that he has the courage to discipline kids when they need discipline. And sometimes the parents don't like it. He has the courage to do it because he knows that's what's right. John Augustus, that's coaching JV. He's a JV coach too. He was our first quarterback in 1999, and William Stroman is back with us. He was a fullback linebacker, I think, on our 97 team. I surely don't want to forget anybody, but we've had those guys back, and it's really Tom Dickerson that coached our offensive line this year. Was on showing my age. I don't remember if he was on the 97 or 98 team, but Tom's back with us, and we have just had so many guys come back, and then other guys that have gone out. Look at Willie Cooper; he's out in the community and he's running the rec department. Mm-hmm. A guy that I think is as valuable, maybe did as much or maybe more than anybody. At putting St. Augustine on the map, getting us to the first state championship so that those behind him believe it could be done. We've Carlton Lewis, and Rashard Hall. Rashard goes off, and he's the second, I think he's the second Clemson player ever to graduate in 3 years. And, you have Caleb Sturgis, that, a great Christian guy that, has kept his faith number one and is, still kicking in the league. So there's so many, and I apologize to those that I didn't mention.
Well, I don't think there's any need to apologize. I think they know where your heart is at. Coach Wiles, I really do appreciate you coming on. Congratulations on all the success over the last 20 years, not just on the field, but off the field, and for all the young men you've molded that have made this community a better place. I know I appreciate it as an alum of St. Augustine High School, as a resident of this community, and I know there's so many more out there, and I really thank you for coming on tonight, Coach.
Well, thanks, Mike, and I surely appreciate the fact that you decided to honor the team and really the community for doing this. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Coach. Take care.
All righty, you too.
So there you have it, my 2015 interview with Coach Joey Wiles on the 10th anniversary of the St. Augustine High School Class 3A Championship. One of the things he talked about in that interview was a program to be proud of. And I think we all here in St. Augustine are proud of this Yellow Jacket program. More than talking about the accomplishments that team made on the field in 2005, it struck me how much Coach Wiles wanted to talk about the accomplishments of these kids after they left St. Augustine High School. The academic success of Richard Hall, the contributions in the community of Willie Cooper, the growth of Quinterrence Cooper as a coach. Some of you may have known this, but I did not. I was not aware that the key to stopping Tim Tebow in high school was a weekend spent with Bob Stoops and Bo Pelini. And more remarkable about that story, as I thought about it after, was that Bob Stoops could not stop Tim Tebow. He slowed him down. He got an interception in the game. But when he met Tim Tebow for a national championship, wasn't able to do enough to beat Florida. The other part of it is that I know some people used to affectionately call Joey Wiles Joe Pa because of his relationship with Joe Paterno, but that he actually went to Joe Paterno for advice on how to prepare his team for the state championship. Coach Wiles could have called any of many great high school coaches in the area that he called friends. Corky Rogers, the legendary Corky Rogers at Bowles. My good friend, Coach Kevin Sullivan, who I'm not sure where Coach Sullivan was in 2005. I know in around 2015 he was at Atlantic Coast High School, and he's since been at Jackson, and I believe Ed White as well. But my point being, all these high school coaches Joey Wiles could have talked to, but he talked to a couple of national championship winning coaches, which speaks to the man and the reputation he built and his ability to connect with people. He talks in the interview about Brian Braddock being on his way to the premier program in North Florida. He meant that Mandarin, obviously. I'm not sure that Joey Wiles knew that he was going to retire and take the position at Flagler College a few months later, which he did after 198 wins. It kind of turned out, and I didn't realize this until I was putting this together this week, that this was one of the final interviews he would give as the head coach of St. Augustine High School. But to the point, he spoke how Brian Braddock was putting together one of the premier programs in North Florida, and Brian did. He took an 0-10 Mandarin team the year before he got there. They went 5-5, 7-3, and then 12-1, and made their own appearance in the state semifinal. And a couple years after he left, won a state championship built on the groundwork that Brian put in place at Mandarin. We're spoiled here in St. Johns County, but he did talk about Brian Braddock being on his way to building a premier program, and he's done that, not where Coach Wiles may have expected him to, but maybe where he always hoped he would. About 2.5 months after that interview, Coach Wiles retired as the head coach of St. Augustine High School. He finished his career at St. Augustine with 198 wins at St. Augustine and 242 overall. He had 3 state title appearances. The 2001 appearance against Rockledge at Doak Campbell, a 38-6 loss, and the longest drive ever from Tallahassee back to St. Augustine. There was the 2005 state championship we talked about. I remember sitting in Dolphin Stadium, as it was called that year, listening to the band play Never Scared in the End Zone, Brandon James throwing a pass to Quinterrence Cooper, Rickerson's legendary pass interference penalty, Caleb Sturgis hitting a 49-yard field goal, celebrating after, sitting there watching the kids get their medals, watching Coach Wiles jump on the podium. Those are the things that I remember from that 05 championship. And then there was also the 2007 championship. A game that didn't go well for the Yellow Jackets. They lost 17-10. Carlos Hyde, now of the Seattle Seahawks, had a touchdown in that game. But my brother and I went down. We tailgated in the parking lot. We had a good time, at least until the game was lost. But still, great memories from great times from a program that Coach Wiles built, not from nothing, but from not much. Before Coach Wiles got to St. Augustine, winning was not an expectation. It was a hope. They hadn't won a playoff game since 1978 before his arrival. This great run this 2020 Yellow Jacket team made didn't start when they arrived at St. Augustine, not completely anyway, because that expectation of greatness started at St. Augustine High School, but it worked its way down to the middle school programs at Sebastian and Murray, Pop Warner, St. Augustine Saints, the West Augustine Yellow Jackets, the Powell All-Stars. If you strap on a helmet in St. Johns County, and particularly in St. Augustine, you have an expectation of greatness. So once again, Congratulations to the 2005 St. Augustine Yellow Jackets on the 15th anniversary of their state championship.